Hello, my name is Anna and I love trying vintage recipes. So today I'm trying some budget-friendly dishes from the 1950s. Today's recipes come to us from Money Saving Meals. This book was originally published in 1959 and we'll talk more about it a little bit later. Happy 2026, everyone. A few years ago, I started to focus on budget-friendly recipes for the month of January, and people seem to really like it. A lot of times around the holidays, we're spending a little bit more, maybe on gifts, but maybe just even on food. We're celebrating, we're having slightly nicer meals, we're gathering with our friends and family, but then you start to feel the pinch a little bit, at the first of the year. So in January, often I like to try a few new to me recipes that cost a little bit less. Maybe they are a little bit easier on your food budget. I decided on this recipe for noodles, Western style. And I immediately noticed two things about this recipe. Number one, when something is Western style, or at least when something is Western style in one of my vintage cookbooks, usually like 40s, 50s, 60s, usually that means it has peppers in it, like maybe peppers and onions or peppers and tomatoes. And this has green peppers and diced tomatoes in it. The second thing I noticed is one of the ingredients, you have options here. It says 1 cup chipped corned beef, spiced ham, or dried beef. Dried beef is one of those things where once upon a time it was probably very budget-friendly, cost-effective. Nowadays, it is very expensive to get dried beef. You can get the shelf-stable kind in the jars. Gosh, I've seen that for $5 to $7 for 1 jar. You can sometimes find it in the refrigerated section for about $5. What I usually like to do in this case is sub in some of those like little pouches of budding beef, budding lunch meat, whatever. That's what I wanted to do for this. My store the one I went to didn't carry that. So I'm using some diced ham in this recipe. But I have noticed that anytime I plan specifically like a budget video or I'm using a budget cookbook, it's really interesting to see how once upon a time in the past, like a certain ingredient was very available or very budget friendly, and nowadays it's changed and it's not that way anymore. So the very first step in this recipe is to cook noodles 10 minutes in boiling salted water and drain. Cook your noodles according to package directions. I actually cooked mine for a minute or two under because I like my noodles to be a little bit firm. And now I'm melting 1.5 tablespoons of bacon fat in a large skillet. It says bacon fat or meat drippings. If you don't have either of those things, you always use butter, oil, whatever. The bacon fat is going to give it a lot of flavor though, and I just happen to have some. Half of a green pepper that I've diced. This came out of my freezer actually, so I do that a lot when green peppers are inexpensive, or if I feel like I'm not gonna use one up, throw it in the freezer. It's not gonna go back to like being able to eat it like a crudité, like a raw green pepper, but if you're gonna cook it and put it in something, it's perfectly fine. I'm just gonna cook that until it is tender. Now that my green pepper has softened up a bit, I need to add 1.5 tablespoons of flour, all-purpose flour. Blend that in. Now I have a cup of diced ham. This is where you could use ham, corned beef, or dried beef. This diced ham was on sale at my grocery store, but you could easily use leftover ham from a holiday meal that you have in your freezer. Always looking for ways to use up, that leftover turkey, that leftover ham from those big holiday meals. I also have a can of fire roasted diced tomatoes. It says, either raw tomatoes cut up or canned tomatoes. I'm using fire roasted because I think they add a lot of flavor. They cost a little extra, but I feel that the amount of flavor they add is worth it. So just get what you can, use what you have. This recipe also calls for finely chopped fresh parsley, which I do not have at the moment. So we're just gonna do without. And I need to let this simmer for about 5 minutes. Now that I've let this simmer, I did taste it for salt and pepper, and it does need just a pinch of salt and some pepper. It's thickened up quite a bit. Now I need to add my cooked noodles. This was 3 ounces of dry noodles that I cooked and drained. I used kind of like thinner noodles. You can see they're sticking together, but they'll come apart. Okay, well, it says to simmer this for another 10 minutes. That seems like a long time, especially because the noodles are already cooked and the sauce is pretty thick. So I'm gonna go maybe like 5 minutes and see how it is. I think mostly everything just needs to sort of like come together and heat through. All right, noodles Western style. I added some green onion to the top because I had them, I like them. I think it's going to complement things very well. Let's try it. Yeah, the green onions are really good in there. Very simple. I think you could season this up more. You know, it's the 1950s, people were seasoning things a little differently. I think this is a good start. It came together super, super quickly. Some additions that I might make, maybe some garlic. I think without the green onion, I'd probably add onions during this step, like finely diced onions during the step where I'm cooking the peppers. You could put cheese on top of this if you have cheese and you like it. It's kind of like a Western spaghetti. I don't know. I think it's really good. I think it comes together very quickly, especially if you're gonna cook your noodles like while you're doing other things. You know, it doesn't take very long. And it's like a quick stovetop thing, right? Yeah, I think this is good. I think it could use some additions, some customizations, depending on what you like. My next dish is going to be sausage with sweet potato and apple. I began by cooking up 8 ounces of pork sausage. When it comes to the sausage in this recipe, you do have a few options. It says that you can use link sausage, or if you're using ground sausage or bulk sausage like I did, you can either form it into small balls or break it up as it cooks. I went with breaking it up as it cooks for a lot of reasons, mostly because it's easier. You don't have to make the individual balls and like move them around and make sure they get brown. But also I feel like cooking the sausage and just breaking it up kind of stretches it a little bit more. If you use link sausage or sausage balls, it's very easy as people serve themselves to be like, I get this many of the thing. I just felt like doing it that way made the meat kind of go a little bit farther, you know? I am preheating my oven to 375 degrees because we're gonna layer this and bake it up. So I have a couple of medium sweet potatoes that I have peeled and I have sliced into about 1/4 inch slices. I used my mandolin for this, it was just a little bit faster. And then I have, it says 3 medium apples that you have peeled and sliced. I'm using Granny Smith apples. Use whatever you want or whatever you have. This is just what I had. I have 1/2 cup of cold water here and I need to mix a few things into it. 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and I have 1 tablespoon of flour. That's what it looks like. Arrange layers of potatoes, apples, and sausage in a baking dish, pouring flour sugar mixture over each layer. So I'm gonna start with some potatoes. Like, it doesn't give a lot of guidance on like how many layers you want. It just says like which things to end with. So we're gonna wing it. Some apples. My sausage is still on the stove. I don't know, this just makes more sense to me to have the sausage crumbled in this way. And then I need to pour just a little bit of this mixture on top. Just a small amount because I don't have a lot of this. All right, we're gonna do it again. I forgot my liquid. Oh no. We'll fix it. There it is. So it says to top with apples and then sausage. So apples, this is just about the right size for a casserole dish. I want to say this is a 2 quart. And the reason I chose this one is because it has a lid and you have to bake this covered. And because it already has a lid, that means I don't have to put foil on top. Some liquid. So now I need to cover this and bake it at 375 degrees for 45 minutes. And I'll let you know if it takes longer than that. Sometimes things like this, especially with something hard like sweet potatoes, it might take a little bit longer, but I'll keep you updated. I ended up adding 10 minutes to the cook time on this. The apples were soft, but the sweet potatoes were not quite as soft as I would have liked them after just 45 minutes. So I added an extra 10 minutes. And I think it's been sitting about 5 to 10 minutes to cool while I took the thumbnail photo, etc. And I think I'm ready to taste it. Kind of pierced it a little bit and things are nice and, you know, soft. Soft, but not complete mush. Do I think I can get a pie-shaped wedge out of this? Maybe. We'll try it, but if it doesn't happen, that's okay too. So I'm cutting. Yeah, it's not gonna happen. It's okay. Oh, there's quite a bit of water in the bottom of this. Hey. So maybe I should let this sit a little bit longer. That's like a lot more water than I expected to see Let me get you in there, hold on. All right, sorry if this is a bit shaky, I'm just holding the camera, but you can see there's like a good amount in there. You know, with the flour and all of that good stuff, you'd think like maybe this was supposed to thicken things up. I don't know, it seems well cooked. So I'm almost wondering if that water was just a little too much, you know? Or again, maybe I should let it sit longer, but now that I have it cut, I think I'm just gonna taste it. I'm gonna make sure I get a little bit of everything. I think the Granny Smith apples were a good choice here because they're a little bit tart. They're sweet, but just a little bit tart. I didn't want this to be so sickeningly sweet. If I wanted to make this again, I think I would either reduce the amount of liquid or maybe like, gosh, maybe I wouldn't even use it. I'm not sure. But the taste and texture are really good. Like I wouldn't want this any softer, I don't think. Yeah, the sausage adds a nice like savory quality to it. So the sweet potato, subtly sweet. The apple, nice and like tart, a little bit sweet. I like this, would modify a little bit just because I feel like that's so much water. And if it sort of starts to absorb back in to the rest of the dish, I will be sure to update you and let you know. My third recipe for this video is going to be Scotch meat patties. So the recipe starts here and then it continues like up here. But I'll have this recipe written out in the description down below. So you make meat patties that are kind of seasoned and stretched out with a little bit of oatmeal. You brown them and then you make a sauce and you simmer them. So I'm thinking maybe kind of like cube steaks or Salisbury steak, a little bit of a take on that because it's a similar cooking process. So I have 3/4 of a pound of ground beef in this bowl. I pulled this from my freezer. Combine meat, milk, oats, and a teaspoon of salt and pepper. I've got 1/3 cup of milk, 3/4 cup of quick cooking oats. I typically prefer to keep rolled oats or old-fashioned oats in my pantry, but you can turn those into quick oats really easily. So you can put the amount you need in your food processor and kind of pulse it a few times until the pieces, the individual oats, are smaller. You might need to add a little bit extra, you know, or adjust the amount a little bit, but that's the basic idea. I've got my 3/4 cup of quick cooking oats in here. Ooh. Salt and pepper. None of these recipes give serving amounts. You know, sometimes you see a recipe and it says serves 4, serves 6. I think they kind of left that open to interpretation on purpose. You know, they're trying to stretch 3/4 pound of ground beef. This is gonna serve like 4 or 5 people. That's just my guesstimate. We'll see how it shakes out. And something I didn't mention in the other recipes is that after each recipe, there's a menu suggestion of what you should serve these with. So I'll talk more about that when I get into my little book chat later. Okay, well, I got everything mixed together. So now I need to clean up and make some patties. I'm forming my meat mixture into thin patties per the recipe. Because they're thin, rather than putting them on like bare on a plate or a sheet tray, I have a baking mat, or maybe you could use some wax paper. I'm thinking, I don't want them to like fuse to that bare surface. I just want them to be a little easier to remove. I'm gonna try for maybe 6 patties and see where that gets us. So I sort of scored this meat mixture with a knife just to give me some guidelines. I'm looking at my skillet and it looks kind of small. Oh yeah, that's pretty thin, I would say. I'll brown them in batches. You'll see what I mean. Got my 6 fairly thin patties here. So now I need to brown these over on the stove. I'm browning my patties in batches, just because my skillet wasn't quite large enough to do all of them at the same time. And you're just browning them at this point. You're not even going to necessarily cook them all the way through, because once these are brown, you put everything in the skillet and add liquid vegetables and you cover it and cook it for another 30 minutes. So this is just to get some nice color on the patties. As you can see, this one, a little misshapen. It didn't quite make it, but that's okay. I just pressed everything back together. These do not have to be perfect looking. So I'm gonna remove these and add the next batch. This was 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil in this pan. It said oil or cooking fat. So I will brown this batch and then we'll move on. Got my platter of browned patties. This next step is kind of something I'm choosing to do, and that is cook the vegetables a little bit before I add them to the water and the patties. So That's 1/4 cup of celery, 1/4 cup of green pepper, and then also a 1/4 cup of finely diced onion. You're supposed to just add the vegetables and the water and cook the patties, etc. I just want to get a little bit of color on the vegetables before I do that. You're not going to cook the vegetables through necessarily because, again, they're going to simmer for quite some time. They're going to simmer in a little bit of water. So this is a cup of water, and then you add a teaspoon of Lea & Perrins, little pepper, little salt. This is like your seasoned cooking liquid. Let's see if I can do this without like blocking the camera too much. You're gonna put your patties carefully, whoa, well that wasn't so carefully, on your vegetables. And you can, you know, if you need to crowd these a little bit, it's fine. This all smells very good, so I have high hopes. Okay, so I got 6 patties, all my veggies. I'm gonna add that cooking liquid. I'm gonna take that down again. So I need to cover this. I'm gonna let it simmer for about 30 minutes. This is what they look like after 30 minutes. So the liquid that's left, we're gonna turn it into a sauce. And I'm gonna remove the meat patties to do this just because that's like a thing I'm choosing to do. I think it's gonna be easier. I did that part off camera just because I had to be very careful. These are kind of meatloaf-ish. So you can see I've got my remaining liquid and vegetables. And so I have a tablespoon of flour right here. And the recipe directs me to dissolve this flour in a little bit of water, which I'm gonna do in a jar so that I can shake it. It doesn't give an amount on the water. It just says a little bit of cold, specifically cold water. Up the heat a little. And you can see how well mixed that is. I mean, you can stir it, but I find that shaking it up can be helpful. I seem to remember my grandma doing that sometimes. So I'm gonna stir this in. That's gonna be the sauce for our Scotch meat patties. I'm going with the misshapen meat patty. It always seems like when I make something and I want to taste it on camera, I go for the least perfect one. It's still gonna taste good, right? Just to inform you, I did end up adding a little bit of extra Lea & Perrins and a little bit of extra salt and some water to the sauce. I definitely needed thinning down. Probably should have used a little more water to mix with the flour, and it was pretty under-seasoned. I'm getting that from these recipes, and that's okay. People season things a little differently back then. Easily fixable though. Easily fixable, right? This is cutting nicely. It seems very tender. That's really nice. Like the texture is lovely. You know, I might season it a little bit differently. Actually, the meat itself, the seasoning is kind of okay. I mean, I don't know, maybe you want to use seasoned salt instead of regular salt, but the salt level seems good to me. And I really like the texture. It's a little bit like a meatloaf. Yeah. So again, the sauce probably needs a little bit of, you know, upping the seasoning factor. Some things I thought about, you could use maybe beef broth instead of water. That would help. Or just like beef bouillon powder mixed with water. If you don't have beef broth, that could be an improvement. But actually, I really like this. It's like a very homey dish. So while I was cooking this up, I ran outside to feed my birds. It's pretty cold outside. There's snow on the ground. Do you know that feeling of coming in to your house or to a house from the outside, coming into a warm house, and then like very homey cooking smells, like very home style. I don't know. That's what this reminds me of. It's like a very home style, tasting, smelling kind of dish. The type of thing where like, you know, growing up, maybe I was like out with friends or a class or something, a practice after school, and I come home, the house is warm and toasty, and then you like smell whatever is cooking for dinner, like wafting through the air. That's what this reminds me of. So good bones on this recipe. Maybe need some seasoning adjustments, but I think all of the recipes that I've made from this book have kind of been that way. But again, you can fix that. Money Saving Meals was published in 1959, and it comes to us from Good Reading Rack Service, Inc. So I'm gonna try to get you in so you can get a closer look at that. Now I tried to find out some additional information about GRRS Inc. And what I was able to find, it was like a publishing company that produced these little booklets. Not all of them were cookbooks. In fact, the ones that I could find, most of them were not. I think I found one other like little booklet like this. See how thin it is? Very, very thin. They had all kinds of subjects. If you're interested in this company, I encourage you to check out eBay. Just type in Good Reading Rack Services Inc. and you'll see the array of their offerings, and it is wide. Like I said, I tried to find more info. What I am imagining, you know, those like metal spinner racks or those little metal countertop racks that maybe they still have them. Sometimes you could see them in like drugstores or like dime stores, which dime store is not really a thing anymore, but I think you know what I'm talking about. Maybe they sold these for just like not a lot of money, or maybe they were free. I can't really tell, but you know, sometimes you get those little booklets and pamphlets that are free. Maybe this was that. I just thought this was kind of an interesting little publication. No author given, just that publishing company. The opening page says, "What shall we have for dinner?" That's an easy question for you to answer after you have decided on the main dish. The main dish is especially important in meal planning. It is the hub around which the rest of the meal is built. And often it carries a large proportion of the cost of the meal. Usually the main dish is the main source of protein, so essential to building and repairing body tissues. These are main dishes, but then at the end of each recipe they give a little sort of like a menu option, just giving you some suggestions on what to serve with that main dish. Usually they supplement that main part of the meal in some way. A lot of these recipes contain few ingredients, which often means, you know, less money spent. Let's look at a few here. There's not like a ton of illustrations to share with you, just the one on the front. We've got this one here. Sort of at the beginning of each chapter, there's a little something. I do love, we get in there. I like how this is made of fish, this F. Oh, and I didn't even notice that the M in meat is sauce, like it's a string of sausages. That's clever. The E in the eggs, it's made of eggs. Okay, I'm moving on. I'm very charmed by this though. One more. The poultry is made of, the P is chicken legs. In a lot of these recipes, you'll find maybe like a minimal amount of meat that's beefed up, stretched a little bit by something else, or you'll find a lot of recipes with chili beans, kidney beans. There's even one in here with soy grits. That was a recipe for something called soy meatloaf. So you do have 3/4 of a pound of chopped meat, but then you also combine that with 3/4 of a cup of soy grits. So stretching that meat, which is often the most expensive part of a recipe. I thought for such a small booklet, they really did have a nice array of dishes, from fish to meat to poultry. They have a section called other dishes, and that's like beans, cheese, etc. One of the interesting things to me when I make budget recipes that were published in previous decades, and I did mention this in I think my first recipe, some of the ingredients that were considered budget friendly, cost effective, like during the time period when this booklet came out, fast forward to today, and those things not nearly as cost effective. Like, yes, I completely understand, like everything is more expensive now than it was back then, but like if you look at the cost of dried beef in 1959 compared to today, it was considered sort of, I don't know, more of a budget friendly ingredient. Stew meats and oxtails and things like that, they were maybe at one time considered cost effective, not so much now. And I noticed that in every single decade because I've done a lot of like budget recipe videos. It's just kind of an interesting trend to see. Now, I found all three of these recipes to be a little bit lacking in seasoning, but that doesn't make them bad, okay? Because seasoning is something that you can easily fix. I thought all three of these had pretty good techniques in them. The basics of how to cook certain things, especially that third recipe, which I'll get into. Could use some salt, some garlic, some things like that. Things were just seasoned differently in the past. If you're new here, or just as a reminder if you've been around, most of the time I do try to cook these recipes as written about 90% of the way. A lot of times I can recognize that, oh, you know, I'd add this or I would change this or whatever. Sometimes I do make little changes, but really I get to these recipes as written about like, I don't know, 85 to 95% of the time. And I do that mostly because I want to see like what they were going for at the time that this recipe was published. What were the expectations? I kind of want to reproduce them just to see like what were tastes like back then, you know? What were techniques back then? I kick things off with noodles, Western style. A lot of noodles and a little bit of meat is what I would say. You had some options for the meat part of this this recipe. It was chipped corned beef, spiced ham, or dried beef. I went with some diced ham. Really did like that this recipe had a little bit of flexibility in the ingredients that you could use. I found several recipes like that in this book. This was really simple. It was fast. It was quick to put together. It does take me longer to cook something when I'm filming it because I have to do all this like setup and like even the prep work, and I have to film all the steps. But if I had been cooking my noodles and prepping everything else at the same time, I think you could have gotten this done in about 20 minutes or less. Quick stovetop main dish. It was filling. It tasted good. You know, I'd add some extra seasonings, just like with any of the other things. Next, I tried sausage with sweet potato and apple. Okay, this one had a good flavor. It wasn't super sweet. I was like, I don't know, that's kind of like a lot of sweet flavors, but you don't add a lot of like sweet ingredients to it, like sugar, brown sugar, anything like that. There's little sugar in it. It was watery. And I said I would update you. The water doesn't really like absorb back in. The liquid I showed you was mostly water. If you think it's like fat or something from the sausage, the sausage really didn't have a lot of fat in it. You were supposed to save a tablespoon of the sausage drippings to put back in there. I couldn't even get a tablespoon drained off of it, so I just threw the sausage in there. So most of it was water, even if it had a little bit of the fat from the sausage mixed in. And that could be, you know, a lot of things. I used Granny Smith apples. Those may not have been the apples that would have been used at this time. I used them because, one, I had them, and this is a budget-friendly video. I wanted to use up what I had. I also used them because Granny Smith apples tend to keep their shape. I didn't want mushiness. I didn't want too much mushiness in this dish. You know, if I made this again, I think I would cut back on the water, or I might even leave the additional water out. I think there might be enough moisture in there to cook everything and not let it get too dry, just judging by the amount of water that was kind of in there when I cut into it. A lot of the seasoning comes from the sausage, but there's not a lot of sausage in this. I think it's still a good dish. There's modifications to be made though. Interesting flavors. I actually ate some of this for breakfast and it was really good. I kind of liked having it for breakfast. This recipe has the following menu suggestion. It says, serve with a crisp green salad. For dessert, have a well-chilled creamy rice pudding made with eggs and milk to supplement the protein from the small serving of meat. So that's kind of what I'm talking about when they're trying to like cut back a little bit on the most expensive ingredients and then supplement with the rest of your meal. And then finally, I made Scotch meat patties. I think out of the three recipes, this one best illustrates what I mean by this is not a bad dish. It needs more seasoning, but the technique is really good. The texture of these meat patties was so good. It's something I really enjoy. If you like meatloaf, you're probably going to like these. Very like warm and comforting. Smelling these cooking was just, I got like an immediately like nostalgic feeling like coursing through my body. This so reminds me of growing up, like just coming back into a warm house and smelling like good things cooking for dinner. Season this up more, you're gonna need it. The meat itself, the flavors in the meat itself, pretty good. It was really the sauce that kind of needed a bit of a boost. I would go with like beef broth, chicken broth, maybe, or if you know, you don't have those things, some bouillon just mixed with water. I think that would go a long way in seasoning the sauce or the gravy. The menu suggestion for this one, it says serve with candied sweet potatoes, cabbage and carrot salad with fruit and cookies for dessert. Now, if you're thinking through all of the flavors of those things, I mean, they're sweeter flavors. So I think, you know, what they're saying here would really complement this dish because it is so like delicious and savory. It's got like the salty quality to it. Overall, I really enjoyed preparing these three dishes. I think they give like a pretty good glimpse of some of the budget-friendly recipe ideas from the 1950s. So what did you think of my recipe choices? Have you had any of these? Have you tried cooking them? Did you grow up eating them? I'd love to hear about that, so please leave me a comment. I'd like to say a special thank you to my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to join us over there, I'll leave a link in the description so that you can do that. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to watch my videos. If you enjoyed this one, please give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I post videos about food, vintage cookbooks, and retro recipes every week. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.